Hello and welcome. I am Trent, and today I want to talk to you about a game called Final Fight Streetwise. That's right, the legendary epic game that I think sunk uh, the Studio 8, Capcom Studio 8 in 2005. Um, yeah, I worked on that game. I was the concept artist. Back then, it was a small studio. I think we only had about 25 developers on the team, and we were making a sequel to Final Fight, the Final Fight series, which was a popular arcade game back in the 1980s. And we thought, well, hey, of all the Capcom brands, this is the only one that Capcom Japan will let us play around with. and so they kind of wanted us to make something that was kind of urban. I think GTA 3 was out at the time, and they wanted something that felt very urban and kind of gritty. And I was the concept artist, the director of cinematics, the voice actor, and yes, I played Kyle Travers. I'm looking for my bro Cody. Anyway, so that was a fun gig. We all kind of did a little bit of everything, and I met some awesome people there, friends that I've only recently kind of, after maybe 10 or 12 years, gotten back in touch with, and in some cases, and some friends that I've just always stayed good friends with. And I wanted to talk to you about the experience of it and talk to you a little bit about it. If you've played this game, um, I think there were some very fun, clever things in it. It was critically hated, despised, loathed, and occasionally it pops up on a worst of list on game trailers or some other channels. And I think there have been a few playthroughs, walkthroughs that got basically they're just ridiculous. It's a ridiculously bad game at times, and most of that, and I'll talk about like what kind of made that work and what works in a game and what didn't work and where we were kind of had our hands tied. And this is by no means me going, hey, but it was hard. No, it it was hard. Making games is hard, but it was also a lot of fun, and had some merits that I think are overlooked. Anyway, so the first kind of environment stuff that we did was the way that it worked during that time. We really wanted to do something that was a little bit more energized. We wanted to do something that had more um, fantasy kind of a flavor, because to us, Capcom was known to be like the Street Fighter company. This was right before Resident Evil 4, where everything went more realistic, but we were really pushing ourselves to do more realistic stuff. So a lot of times the modelers would hand me a geometry so that I'd have perspective, and I would just paint over that, and I would kind of add details and flair that they could then go in and model and add in as details or whatever. Um, I got to redesign some very classic Final Fight characters. Cammy was actually originally a Street Fighter character, but we got the approval for us to be able to use some Street Fighter characters as a enemies for the player to fight in the underground pit fights. And so Cammy was one of those. There was talk at one point of doing a first person shooter Cammy game, and I thought that was a terrible idea. But at the same time, sometimes you just take a bad idea and you try to make it work. This was the very last thing that I drew for Capcom. It says 2006. I had left in January of 2006, where I went on to work on World of Warcraft. Uh, we'll talk more about some of the characters later. This was, if you've played the game, you might remember. I think in this scene, you had to stomp roaches, and it was designed by, actually, I remember a lot of conversations where, and I don't know if I should mention people's names, but one of my favorite designers that I've ever worked with designed this room, and there was a mini game where you stomp on roaches, and I think he had an affinity for mini games, and because the game had a lot of mini games in it, and I enjoyed that aspect. I think that was actually really redeeming. In a lot of ways, Final Fight Streetwise was way ahead of its time. If you were to look at how I was playing Assassin's Creed the other day, and I realized, man, there's like it's kind of real world. There's a lot of these sort of mini game things that you do, and there's a lot of exploration involved, and trying to make that realistic, somewhat realistic world come to life. And we were just ahead of our time on that, but we had no framework for what could inspire, what would work for that type of a game. We were really pioneering in that way, and when you're pioneering, you fail a lot, until you can, especially if you don't have a very extensive budget, which we did not. This was the drug lab where, towards the end of the game, actually, Kyle goes down underground and he sort of seeking out the cure for a drug that is just infecting Metro City. It's called Glow. And his brother Cody gets hooked on that. And I think that's kind of what upset some fans, is that we kind of turned a legendary Capcom character, Cody, into somebody who was a little bit strung out on a drug because he was getting a little bit older and he needed that edge. And his younger brother comes in to save him, which had its, it had sort of a redemption story in the end, but I don't know that it was treating the characters with the level of respect that some people expected. You'll notice in terms of style, I used a lot of photo bashing back then, and for me that was it's something that it's not that I'm opposed to it. I was working on a very realistic game. I didn't understand lighting. I had only learned Photoshop in 2001, and I think this was 2004. And there weren't a lot of guys who had. It wasn't like it is now, where you can go online and learn all these techniques, and buy people's gumroads and learn how they photo bash, and then like make more accurate lighting and get different effects. I was literally, like I said, undiscovered country. There, at that time that this game was made, there were only a handful of concept artists in the game industry at all, and most people had no idea what a concept artist even was or what we did. And so I cringe sometimes when I look at some of this work, but at the same time, I realize it's it's history. It is part of the history of how I got to where I am now, and it's a part of the history of the Capcom universe now. Although I believe Capcom completely disowned this game. this was this was an area where it's basically a dry dock. You go down into this dock area, and it's one of the new areas that you get to unlock as you progress through the game. And I actually like this area a lot. Had a cool city in the background. Uh, we modeled a lot of our initial concepts on the Fight Club style of a game. And, well, that's a weird way to put it. We were inspired by the film Fight Club, mostly just for the underground pit fighting. There hadn't really been a video game about an underground pit fighter back then. This was the first one that I knew of to do it. Technically speaking, I think there was actually a game called Pit Fighter years and years ago, but it was more of a 2D or like a 1v1 kind of a boxing game, underground boxing game. But Final Fight Streetwise was basically putting you in the shoes of a character whose profession was to be a fighter. And so that inspired a lot of the settings. This one, I think, was heavily inspired by the film Fight Club. I just had an empty box. A lot of these drawings were just me sketching over empty boxes. And as you can tell, I didn't have much time. A lot of days, I would sit down and I would literally have to jam out 5 concepts in a day. So I would just do like thumbnails, basically. I got to design a good number of female characters, and some of them, if you see on the far left, that was it was there was an area in the game where you go to Japan, or Japantown, and so we wanted these sort of otaku girls, kind of like the Harajuku girls that you would see, kind of just more dressed like characters, or just they had a lot more flavor and character. They used to wear a lot of like the leg warmer socks, and fashionably trendy for its time. And of course, there's the Cammy redesign that I think was actually, I've seen that cosplayed by a couple of girls before, so I think maybe it was used later. It was one of the few things that Capcom did not completely disown from the game. Poison, did several iterations of Poison. Wasn't so sure about how short that skirt is, but there wasn't too much resistance from the team on that, so I think she looks very different in the game. There is a graveyard area, and this was heavily photoshopped as well. I mean, by heavily photoshopped, I mean photo bashed. I don't remember how it turned out in the final game. I believe this is just outside of the church towards the end of the game when you go to fight Belger up in the tower. The challenge of redesigning a classic character. Now, some people hated, absolutely hated it. As I said, they hated this game entirely. But some people specifically hated the look of the characters. And this was a tricky challenge because when I was designing, trying to redesign Guy, I really wanted him to feel like he was modern and he fit into the universe that we were making. But what I kept finding was that people on the team even were just kind of like, look, he has to have these classic elements. And those classic elements required, of course, the shoes, the colors, and some other elements. I was a very poor painter back then. I did not have any understanding of values or lighting. It's embarrassing. I didn't really even understand good color relationships, but I was a working professional. Yay for the early 2000s. It's a lot more competitive now. But anyways, I think I was a competent designer, and this is where it really where I sort of cut my teeth on the industry and got under an understanding of what conceptual design is. And so one of the things about this particular iteration, though, this character was that he did at one point in the game he had more of a fashionable sense. He was well off, like he was running. I believe he was running not a gang, but he was running a group of fighters, and uh, I don't know if they were freedom fight. I don't know exactly what they were doing. I don't remember actually, but I do remember that he was supposed to look like he was running a business and he was well off. And so not quite, not like a yakuza or something like that, but he was a badass. And so I had to give him like a suit kind of a thing. And I thought, I think the one that they went with was the white suit, but I'm not sure. A lot of times designing characters for this sort of a setting just meant putting them in normal clothes and getting them away from their sort of fictional uh, anime looking outfits. Hager is, I believe this game took place about 7 or 8 years later after the events of the previous Final Fight game. I could be inaccurate about that. Um, and it is difficult because one of the things about that is that the original Final Fight games were set in the 80s where everything was about WrestleMania, and at the time that we made this game, wrestling wasn't as popular as it used to be, and it was a different vibe entirely. The old school wrestlers, like, okay, the old school Final Fight games, you'd knock over a trash can and a turkey would fly out, and then you'd grab that turkey and eat it and get health. And that sort of broke the illusion of the fantasy of this urban brawler GTA style level of seriousness. So we were always torn between those two things, and the same was true with Hager. Hager was I believe he was the mayor of Metro City, and he was also a pro wrestler. So yeah, how do you make that work? I don't know. That was a difficult challenge. Hotel Bijou, which is where I believe this was like a crack den. This was where all the glow, sort of like all the glow addicts would go and hang out. And this was where I sort of learned that you can really give something a lot of atmosphere by just making everything blurry. I got to do a few promo pieces. This was a shot that surprisingly I did not use any photo reference for this, but except for the bricks, I think I used some photos in that. But oh, and the jukebox as well. So I can't say that I didn't use any photos at all. But it showed a little bit of an attitude that Kyle had. Kyle was a former military, so he's just kind of hanging here. He's hanging at a bar, and we didn't have a logo yet at that time. I remember Literally, the marketing guys said to me, just use the GTA font for the logo. And I said, it's not GTA. And they said, you know what? We'll worry about selling the game. You worry about making it. And I was just so turned off by the way that that guy was speaking to me about that, as if we're literally no different than selling, I don't know, paper plates and branding it something that people would buy because of the branding on the damn, packaging. I was so angry at that guy, and of course I let my studio manager know it. Here's where I got to explore a few more logos, and I really wasn't strong with logo design. I don't really work much with fonts. I did work in fashion design for a little while, but most of the time with anything printed that we did, I let the people who are more specialized in that handle it. But in this case, when you're one of the only concept artists on a team, when you're the only concept artist on a team, a lot of times they just want you to do everything, you know. Later, I did have a little bit more. Actually, no, the bottom right logo still doesn't look right. I didn't like the final logo that they used in the game. I liked this one that was a little bit more squared. I think it had like a more of a punchy feel to it. It felt like something that you'd actually see sitting in like on a sticker on like a lamp post or a brick wall outside of a real fight club or something. That was what I was aiming for. These were just marketing materials. I was trying to find some shots that I thought would really kind of sell the feel of the game. This is actually, we're starting to get into all the content from the concept art book that was made for the game. We were exploring the effects of glow. So as you can see on the bottom right is probably like a first level addict kind of a thing that you might just see like some younger guy who's a little bit strung out, and then in the middle he gets torn clothes and his skin starts to like crust over and actually becomes hardened until you get the top left version. The top right version I think would have actually been really cool, but it almost looked like Tron. I think green has a general sense of like a poison. you know Dr. Chang was a character who was mass producing the glow, and she created her own monstrosities. And you'll see some of those if you play the game. Actually, I think there's really only one, but she was kind of evil. I think I made her look like a girl I was dating at the time. Kyle Travers, Cody's younger brother. He drank too much, he smoked too much, and he fought people for money. I really liked the dreadlock Kyle Travers in the bottom right, but there was a big problem with at that time with this. I think the getting everybody on the same page, which was uh, a lot of people on the team felt that giving a white guy dreadlocks made him too polarizing. He had tattoos, a huge belt buckle, he had a lot of style, and I think that people thought the response that I got was he stands out too much. He's too unique. In fact, the whole bottom row, everybody said he's too sort of unique. You want an every guy, and I hate that term. That was when I really learned to just hate making popular content, trying to chase whatever everybody else is doing and chase what everybody's going to find to be okay. If you go right down the middle, you don't make anybody happy. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. I attribute the failure of the game to the lack of desire for some decision makers on the project to be bold and make a statement. Dante is bold in Devil May Cry. He is a bold character. Chun-Li is a bold character. Blanca is a bold character. Any of these characters from Street Fighter were bold, and I would even venture to say that the characters from uh, Resident Evil 4, which is the main comparison that we had at the time, it had come out just before we released. I think that Leon was a bold character. He had kind of an attitude, although he did have long hair too. And that was a big thing. They were like, you can't give him sunglasses of any particular shape. You can't give him like, uh, uh, dreadlocks that would really make him unique, or any kind of unique sort of features that would really make him stand out as what I would consider iconic. They wanted kind of a combination between something that felt like Jason Statham, I believe, and just your average everyday dude. Sharp, pointy cheekbones, very, very short hair that's kind of buzz cut. And I would have thought it would be so much more interesting to give the character some unique thing. But the only thing I got to keep was the short sleeve jacket, and that was with the stripes down the arms, and that was pretty much the only element of the uniqueness factor that I got to keep for the character. But I think it came out to be about the middle top of this sheet. We got to design. It was interesting because I've always wanted to design um, an RPG. I always loved designing characters for RPGs, and unfortunately, this was like my first shipped game for PlayStation. My first unlicensed, my very first shipped game. I painted rocks in a He-Man game, and then I did a bunch of Terminator on the Game Boy Advance stuff. But Final Fight Streetwise was the first game that I got to make that was really its own like standalone like game. It wasn't just some licensed thing, and I always like to design characters like psychics and shopkeepers, and but I like to give them a little bit more character and personality. This was so grounded, that I wasn't allowed to. Where I did get to have the most fun was with the other pit fighters, and this dude is Reefer Madness, and he's still awesome. Wow, look at that, badass. He's even got like a gold marijuana leaf on his shoulder and Jamaican pants and a huge, huge stogie. Cody Travers. Cody was a difficult challenge because we wanted to show that he was coming out of prison. We wanted to show that he was, so that's why he has the orange. He's wearing like the orange top. And he's representative of blue collar worker type of a guy, probably fell into underground pit fighting with his brother because, well, that's the only thing he was ever good at. I think is the way that him and Kyle kind of put it. It's the only thing that the Travers brothers were ever good at. So that's what they kept doing. And I think I don't know if it's ever been made clear in the history of uh, the the Capcom universe why Cody was in prison in the game before. But there is a Street Fighter game where he's featured wearing I think it's Third Strike. He's featured wearing like a striped, which nobody wears, striped prison outfit. Like from it's like what was he locked up in the 1800s? I don't know. Was he have like a ball and chain on him? I don't know. But I had to try to modernize him and make him fit into our sort of modern by 2005 standards, 2004 standards of Metro City. But he was also a little bit older, so he's got a few more wrinkles on his face. Sodom was a classic Capcom character that I got to redesign, and I say redesign as if I did anything to change him. I did nothing to change him. He is the same Sodom that I saw in previous games. I just redrew him. This was after I'd sort of learned my lesson with Guy, trying to change Guy and trying to change Hager. This was pretty much the final sheet that they built the Kyle Travers in game from. And in hindsight, like not the best angle to design a character like this from. But I think we wanted game camera. We wanted to get an idea of what does he look like at game camera. Surprisingly, I think I had cut the stripes out because I thought, well, they're not going to go for the stripes. They did keep the chain wallet though, so yay. And the colors on his pants look like they're camo, but it's actually just the discoloration of the scan. There's a lot of discoloration in these, but the colors weren't very good to begin with, so it's not really a big loss. This is really old stuff, by the way, about 14 years. The Weasel's office was a ridiculous part of the game where pretty much he just runs around the room. I can't really tell you what he was doing in there. He runs a porn theater, and he's just an overall kind of a dirty guy. and beating him up was a lot of fun. It was really rewarding. That was my good friend Enzo's voiced the character the Weasel. I think I used some photo reference to create some mock-up posters that I thought we would get some cool renders for, but we never actually did. I had the opportunity to storyboard the entire game, all the cutscenes, and I don't remember exactly how many hours that was, about six maybe, 5 or 6 hours of cutscenes. And I worked to do my best to direct them, and even though a lot of it was outsourced, we'd get our regular rolls back or reels back from them, and we'd go over them and try to like change camera angles and rework things from there. If you played the game, you might recognize this scene. It's like the very first scene where Kyle is in the ring and Cody is chewing him out as per usual. Hey, you could be a better fighter than that. I don't know. He's just so he's such a I don't know overbearing older brother. Tattoo artist. I believe this guy lived downstairs from Kyle, and I think he was his landlord. It's tough to pose characters without props, but I always tried to show a little bit of their personality, of how they might move and their level of confidence. Whenever designing a character like this, and I think that the pack of Marlboros rolled up in his camo T-shirt really communicated the idea behind the character. This was a Yakuza henchman who, after my guy concepts were rejected and everybody said, oh, he looks too Yakuza, I just decided, you know what? Fine then. We'll just use that design for Yakuza henchman. In the cafe, there is a waitress, and she doesn't do much, but I think they did like 1-to-1. She looks exactly like that in the game. Pork Chop was part of the Blue Ballers. The Blue Ballers were Weasel's group of henchmen, and basically they were like Batman villains, basically, only more gross. Just had they had like, I mean, you look at their logo on the back of their shirts, and they got like matching bowling shirts, and I don't know. I had a lot of fun just sort of making little subtle jokes wherever I could in the designs. This was Sergeant Washington, who was Kyle's girlfriend's brother, and just a little overprotective. I don't know why I wrote Wonder Boy on the back. I was just into logos and things. When you're designing that many logos, you just start to like grab stuff and go, I'm not entirely sure why, but it seemed to work. I think they cut that though. I think he's just wearing a black jacket. Hager, here are some alternate Hager designs. He originally had the leather belts crossing over his chest, and I decided to just hack that. We'll just do one. That's more modern, more stylish. And then those muscle shirts that show off even more of the pecs. I don't know. Tony, pretty generic Italian mobster type of dude. The Stiff, also pretty generic character design in terms of, I mean, he just wears like a suit that's kind of more casual and relaxed. I think that maybe, I don't know, if I could redesign the Stiff, I don't know that I would change his design much at all, other than to maybe give him some little thing that makes him a little bit more iconic. This is where I would say that Final Fight Streetwise is where I kind of learned how to design somewhat bland characters. And then of course you have the Weasel. The Weasel was my favorite villain of the game. I think that probably the only redemptive villain of the game. There were several others though. There was Ghost, and he was pretty cool, but he didn't do much in terms of the actual game story or anything like that. And then you had Handsome Bob. Handsome Bob was another one of the pit fighters. He didn't do much, except he was just there to introduce the original concept of him being of the main character fighting in a fight club, and he was just like your first fight. Um, I think I found out later that there was a Handsome Bob in, I think, a Guy Ritchie film, and there was a Handsome Bob in another film. And I don't remember why we thought that was okay. I think it was placeholder. We thought we'd change it, and then we were like, screw it, just keep it. Random characters from around Metro City. You've got shopkeepers, little old ladies, and it's so funny if you actually listen to some of the things that the characters in Metro City say to you. Very offensive stuff. By today's standards, this game would never get made. Lou, the skin. Lou is a tattoo artist and extremely eccentric. I based him off of a friend of mine who was also a tattoo artist for a while, but Lou is a little bit more crazy than him. He's got everything pierced, man, and loves pain, that sort of a thing. Skinny as hell, just doesn't eat at all. And he's wiry. The way he even moved around a room was kind of weird. There's Ghost. Ghost was another one of the fighters. He was albino, and he was also I don't remember. I think that's actually very offensive now that I think about it. He's an albino, and they called him Ghost. Well, he called himself Ghost, so it's okay because he called himself that. Um, the Cleaver was a character who was sort of the right hand man of Belgard or Belgar, who he's just like a sicko psycho kind of a guy, and we thought giving him sneakers and a jumpsuit would make him feel like, oh yeah, this guy runs around really fast. And I don't know how they built the model off of this guy. There's You can't even see his face really. I mean, there is a face shot, but come on, that's not even really a very good drawing. Awful. It's pretty obvious that this dude is Belger. He's sort of like the series villain, and I think he was actually the brother of the original Belger, and he was a priest. And I don't know why we were we were of the mind that he had, priests had too much influence and power, and we wanted to show that how this guy was using that to corrupt people, especially in a city like Metro City where people really needed something to help save them. But anyway. Vanessa Sims. What can I say about her you can't see for yourself? She was basically Sergeant Sims' brother and Kyle's girlfriend. She doesn't do much in the game at all. I think she gets kidnapped at one point, and she finds a matchbook that tells you where the stiff is. That's a weird statement. Anyway, Too Ill was a dude who sold you guns around the corner. Kind of just another thuggy kind of a guy. I did a lot of research into hip hop and kind of gang culture type of stuff. But I think it got a little too real. Started looking into getting a gold grill and started hanging my pants down to my knees. And Andare was he was a character from the classic Final Fight games, and we brought him back. We brought him back in all of his red animal print glory. The Ballers had a forklift that they modernized to run people over with, and there's a fun little mini game in there where you get to do that. I think the Weasel's chasing you around on that thing. Yeah, he sets you up, and then you go find him in this warehouse, and then he's like, "Get him, boys!" Yeah, it's good. Um, Here we see a few more shots of environments that were done. Some of the explorations on Poison. Just some of the different outfits she might have worn. And then, of course, guess which one they would pick? The one that looked the most like the original. So that was frustrating. Here's Kyle's apartment, although in the game, we didn't get to use this. I wanted him to really look up to a dude named Diggum Smacks. He would have been like the legendary fighter that Kyle would have like dreamed of one day being, like, Diggum Smacks. I don't know why I wanted that, but to me, it humanized the character more to give him somebody to idolize. And I guess he idolized his brother more than anyone. But and then it was sort of like his rise to save his brother. In a lot of ways, the game sort of failing and him saving Cody, in a lot of ways, is sort of like him failing as a little brother because the game failed and it was his story. It's kind of sad. Anyway, in his environment, I wanted to try to show bits and tidbits of his personality. He's a messy guy, and he doesn't make much money as a pit fighter. But he would hang up a punching bag in his living room. That would be a very big priority for him. And back then, yes, we still had those CRT monitors. There was a lot of photo bashing going on in the Flesh Scrawl, the tattoo parlor that was. There was actually two tattoo parlors, I believe. There was the one that was. No, yeah, there was, because Lou had a tattoo parlor, and then there was the one downstairs from Kyle's apartment. There's a Jim Morrison poster in the background and random tattoo art on the wall. I went to a lot of seedy looking places like this when I lived in LA, so I had a really good frame of reference. I don't even remember drawing the electronics shop, but I do remember it in the game because the guy behind the counter had some great voice work. There was a part where the train crashed to block off areas of the city. I really don't know what the point of drawing that photo on the right of the cityscape is, because quite literally you could have just used a photo for that. I think this game was where I sort of began to develop a distaste for wanting to use photos, because I didn't really get to do anything creative with it except Google things that would add character and personality to the people that I was drawing. If I had proceeded along this line, though, who knows, I may have been designing environments for Tomb Raider or, more, Naughty Dog type of realistic games. And maybe I would have gotten really good at it. And it is an art in a different way. It's just not the way that I wanted to really develop. And gosh, just lots of them. Like I said, I was jamming out about five of these a day, and I had a whiteboard on my wall because I was doing so much. I was a bit of a workaholic, always have been, and so I'd have a whiteboard, and I would just kind of invite people to come in and write whatever they needed on the wall, and then I'd just kind of like tackle it and email it out, and then we'd move on. There was a pawn shop. There's the room where Kyle gets into a gunfight with the stiff up in the top right corner. I think the psychic shop was cut. I don't remember seeing that in the final game. The pawn shop definitely was in there, and we've seen the warehouse. This is where the blue ballers chase down uh, Kyle. Uh, I believe it was where the weasel jumps into the crate lifter. Here's a shot of Japantown and the Pier District. And then, of course, you have the lovely porn theater where the Weasel sort of runs all of his operations. This was tricky because I didn't want to show anything. There were a few things that were considered a little too suggestive. I think in the final game they just had a pair of lips up on the screen and some moaning or something like that. It ended up coming off a lot more comical, which is, I think, a good decision. Um, wouldn't want to offend people with that. Here we got into some really gangsta type of stuff. With chipmunks with the bling and the gold chains around their necks, and SWAT teams. Some rejected underground pit fighters, and some of these guys just ended up becoming thugs around the city. I kind of anticipated, I've always been a bit of a trendsetter, and I thought that I thought that everybody would be wearing athletic pants soon. So I kind of did a lot of the characters with that, and they do. See, everybody's wearing yoga pants now. Here's some more promotional materials and early just kind of character shots. When I didn't have anything to do, I was on the job, so I would just draw the characters and try to do like movie posters and stuff. This was a gruesome scene. I really don't need to draw any more blood after this. This was an area where it's an all-out brawl with Cleaver in, man, was this the kitchen of the Italian Tony's Italian restaurant? It possibly is. I just remember that everything gets wrecked, and it's sort of just before you go underground to the laboratory. That's all I remember about it. Man, it's been a long time, and it's pretty deep in the game too. It's like the last 25% of the game. Sort of contrary to what people have heard, there was a game called Final Fight Seven Sons that was being developed that was cell shaded and probably a lot more like what we see with Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 5. Some of my early explorations for Kyle were heavily stylized, and I still feel very strongly that the game would have done a lot better had we taken that visual approach and that sort of focus on multiplayer beat 'em up kind of gameplay as a focus instead of trying to chase down that urban gangster brawler type of a thing. ended up going to Blizzard after that because they were doing stylized games. Here's a closer look at some of the more stylish Kyle designs that were rejected. I liked this one a lot, actually. He kind of looks like the guy from Lost, Sawyer, a little bit, but with blonde hair, blonde dreads. And I thought this would have been a great look for Kyle. A little bit maybe too serious, though. A little too like this would be a very gritty, very gritty final fight. But as they said, too much character, too much personality. This was just one of the shops that you could go into and start a fight inside the shop. I think you could buy basic stuff, gum or whatever. It would give you health. I don't remember. You have to be careful with putting logos in some of these environments. You can't ever have an actual image that represents a company. The company, Capcom could get sued for something like that. And there you have it. I wanted to end on the weasel. I don't know why he just happened to come up in the progression towards the end. So that was a look at Final Fight Streetwise. It was, as I said before, it was the probably the most educational game that I ever worked on. It really taught me a lot about game development and what the role of a concept artist is. A lot of people ask me, how can I get into the or how can I improve my concept art skills? Should I go to school or whatever? And the answer, in my opinion, is just go and work on games, even if they're games that fail, because you'll still learn. And after I had applied originally to Blizzard several times and was rejected, but after shipping Final Fight Streetwise, they took me a little bit more seriously, and I think it was because of that game experience. I knew a little bit more about what I was doing. And so with that in mind, even though I'm embarrassed to look at a lot of the artwork from this game, and I don't feel like it's a strong representation of what I'm capable of doing, it is a part of my history, and it is a part of gaming history, in some ways. And I know a few of the people that worked on the game actually requested to have their names removed from the credits because they felt so poorly about what they had done. But from my experience, even the stinkers are valuable because there is some merit in just the process of learning. I was heavily involved in the story and heavily involved in the voice acting and the directing of the cinematics. And ultimately, I look back on it and I think, man, with another year of development, that game really could have been great, and it could have been way ahead of its time. But sometimes the budget just doesn't allow for you to really capture a fully realized vision. I think that the team was always looking for somebody to come in with answers to make it perfect. There were some people on the team who fought throughout the whole development, saying, "Hey, this should be a different kind of game. This should be more like a Street Fighter kind of fun, throwing shoryukens and stuff." And I wouldn't disagree with that, but I think that it's hard to sort of see the forest through the trees. And what that means is when you're in it, it's hard to take a look back at the whole project and evaluate, is this going to be good and is this going to be worthwhile? And that's why usually console games do need that extra 6 months of polish, and that's why a lot of the games get patched up after their release now on PC or even with consoles now. We couldn't do that back then. Consoles were not attached to the internet back then. I know that's a strange concept, but they weren't. They were standalone entirely. Anyway, so overall, yeah, sure. I wouldn't put it at the top of my resume, Final Fight Streetwise, but I'm glad it's in there. It is a valuable part of my past, and I do wish that I could get back into doing voice acting stuff because it was the most fun that I ever had in game development. I had so much fun voice acting, even though some of the lines, I don't think they took the best take. I feel like I got pretty tired, and I was running on entirely on cigarettes and caffeine and alcohol, and Now I don't do any of those things, so I don't know that I could even capture the same performance. But it would be a lot of fun just to do some voice acting stuff again. But that's not really where my career has taken me. I've kind of gone the direction of doing more conceptual design, and that's been pretty good to me. These were my roots of where all that began, so I am actually proud of it to some extent. There are some lines that I still get a chuckle out of, and when I watch a couple of people do walkthroughs on YouTube, it's very enjoyable to see them snicker at parts that I thought were awful and intentionally awful because they made me laugh. And I feel like the same was true for some of the guys on the team who were really just trying to make the best out of a very difficult situation. It was a very difficult game to make, to keep the Capcom Japan team happy and keep the fans of the series happy and keep ourselves happy doing it, because sometimes you just got to do the job that's in front of you and do it to the best of your abilities with what you've got. And sometimes all you've got is, I don't know, a toothpick and a hammer, and somebody says, build me a house. And you just do the best with what you got. But, with all that said, great friendships came out of it. Great life experiences came out of it. And I don't know, maybe I'll go back and actually play it again. It might be a lot of fun. I believe that somebody could take the cutscenes from this game and make a trailer that would look really awesome, and people would, even by today's standards, would go, why did I miss that game? Wow. Anyways, that's it for this one, dudes. It's been a lot of fun going back and just kind of taking a look at a game from my past that I've worked on. And I hope you enjoyed this. And if you'd like to see me cover some of the other things that I've worked on, drop me a message and let me know. I could talk about my Ghost Rider days, my old Creed days. I did one video on that. I could talk a little bit about what it was like working on the spin-offs for Scud the Disposable Assassin, or World of Warcraft, or Diablo 3, or League of Legends, or any of the other number of games that I've worked on. It might be a lot of fun to do a little inside look like this on the concept art for those. It'd be great to do something more modern, but it's I don't want to upset those companies. So if you've played Final Fight Streetwise, and if you have any particular moments that you liked, or particular moments that you absolutely hated, or were just absolutely pissed you off, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. It was a game from a long time ago, and yeah, it can be fun. It could, I don't know. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it. And also, I'd love to hear what you think of the commentary on it. It was a lot of fun to do this and kind of look back on a lot of that old stuff. I'm glad I kept it. I have a hard drive that just has everything from the last 20 years. So it'd be fun to go through some of that stuff. Until then, I'll catch up with you guys after I find my brother, Cody.